I'd like to welcome everyone. My name is Rayvon Gardner-Williams, and I serve as an admissions officer here at MIT Sloan School of Management. I'm excited about the opportunity to host tonight's panel discussion with a dynamic group of Sloanies who will introduce themselves shortly. First and foremost, when we are doing any presentations, we feel that it is mission critical for us to start off each presentation highlighting the fact that MIT Sloan is indeed a mission-driven school. Everything that we do comes back to our mission, and that's to develop principled, innovative leaders who improve the world and generate ideas that advance management practices. This desire for our students to make an impact is central to not only the MIT Sloan experience, but the broader MIT experience as well. We are seeking out students who are mission driven and students who have a history of leadership and impact, who have the ability to work with others and think and act innovatively. With that being said, I'm sure you are all probably tired of hearing from me. So with that being said, we're going to transition to our panelists and have them all introduce themselves in the order in which they appear on the screen. I'm going to go on mute, and then if we can have Manuel start us off, and I'll jump back on shortly after we conclude introductions.
Hi, thanks very much for that, Rayvon. My name is Manny Montez, and I am the Director of Procurement for Lineage Logistics for now Lineage.
Hey y'all, my name is Alexa Katz. I'm a manager at Deloitte, where I'm a consultant. I was in MBA 2024 and had returned to Deloitte after, I was at Deloitte before Sloan and had returned just about almost a year ago.
Hi all, I'm Brian Silverman, classmates with two of these fine folks on this call. Since leaving Sloan, I've been working at Desri on the finance team. Desri is a renewable energy firm. We're a owner, operator, developer of utility scale renewable energy projects. And prior to Sloan, I spent most of my career as an Army officer. So happy to talk about pivots with anyone on this call.
And I'm Jose Amic. I was also Harvard, like MIT Sloan class 2024. I was actually part of the early admission program, which I applied to when I was a senior at Harvard. And then that gave me time to start a company, which I'm still working on, called Zeta Surgical. And I'm also in parallel to the company. I'm doing a PhD right now in neuroscience at Cambridge.
Awesome. And then I'm also joined by a colleague, Morgan, who's on the back end answering any other questions that you all may have. Morgan, if you want to just jump on and say hi really quickly.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining tonight's session. Really excited to answer your all's questions, and feel free to answer, or rather ask questions throughout the session. I will be highlighting some to answer live by the panelists at the end, so feel free. Thanks for joining.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Morgan. We're going to just jump right into questions for our panelists, and we curated a few questions that we received prior to the start of the session. So I'll go ahead and get started with the first one. Out of curiosity, one of our attendees was wondering, what types of events does MIT Sloan have for LGBTQ plus MBA students?
Rayvon, do you want just any one of us to take this, or do you want to?
Sure, this can be for anyone.
Sure, I'm happy to start. There's a couple marquee events, I think. One thing to highlight MIT wide is the concept of a C function, a cultural function. This is where every club on campus basically has a big sort of party. The Sloan Pride one is, I think, one of the more popular events. Alexa, maybe you could speak to this. I think you might have actually helped organize it. So big event, super fun, super popular across the organization. And then the other one to highlight is every year, the whole crew would make their way out to P-Town and spend a weekend out there, which was really great. Honestly, some of my more fond memories of time spent with classmates, just kind of getting away from campus and getting to know one another in a different setting.
Yeah, and I'll pile on there. I love in general at Sloan, there's a ton of opportunities for travel, obviously internationally, but some of, I think, my fondest memories are the ones that are closer to home and having access from Boston to a ton of nature. There's a big, usually like a big fall retreat that we take up in just like renting a cabin out in New Hampshire and Maine. And I think that was really where I met most of my friends that were in Pride because it was early on in the school year and we had a chance to just like buckle down, like cooking at home, and just having a good time, um, out in a place that's not necessarily right on campus. So that was definitely a highlight for me. And then definitely echo the C functions across the board are super fun. I think definitely the Pride C function is one of the most attended and most memorable. I believe we did a drag the first year, our first year, is that right, Brian? We had a ton of classmates, including mostly allies, honestly, that were performing on stage. We had this awesome venue and it was just a lot of fun. So definitely a lot of opportunities, whether you're into like smaller group settings. There's also we did a lot of smaller dinner groups or game nights and things like that. Or if you're more into like the big party settings, there's opportunities for that as well.
Jose or Manny, did either of you want to chime in?
Yeah, and I think I
Yeah.
agree with what was said.
Awesome. So I think that actually segues perfectly into the next question. We got was what are ways that the Sloan Pride Club collaborates with other clubs across Sloan and MIT? And this can be for anyone.
Yeah, just I'll start here as well, just because the C function was a good example of this. Right, like I probably split my time at Sloan between three main clubs. Like I was in the sustainability slash like energy club, Pride, and then the Vets Club. And when we were doing our C function, which like Alexa was mentioning, it was big drag show and like a giant club with mostly allies performing. Like there were, I think, two or three Sloan veteran club um, squads that were up there performing. And the fact that like the Vets Club is performing at the C function, and was like we were having events together all the time, right? Like I think that just speaks to, um, I mean, and I guess I'm sort of alluding to some maybe like implicit expectations about how those clubs might relate to each other. But what I'm trying to say is that they absolutely don't exist. The Pride Club was super integrated with every other organization on campus and overwhelmingly just could not have been a more sort of welcoming and um, equal environment.
I think if you asked most people that I knew in our class, like what my brand was at Sloan, they probably would say beer. 'Cause I started and led our beer club. And one of my favorite events that I hosted was a collab with Pride. We went out to Dorchester to a gay-owned brewery, Dorchester Brewing Co. The owner's fantastic. He is just like such a wonderful human. And then brought in the LGBTQ Historical Society. I'm forgetting their name right now, but they document and preserve basically like Boston and New England LGBTQ history. So we had an awesome presentation from that organization and a presentation from the owner himself at this brewery and just a chance for like everyone to chat. So it was a really cool way to like bring beer people into like the queer space and bring queer people into a beer space, which is like two aspects of my identity and my hobbies that I really enjoy. So that was definitely a collaborative memory of mine.
Alexa, you touched on a really great point about just being able to utilize not only Cambridge but the larger Boston community as you leverage your MBA experience. So I was wondering if anybody else could, Alexa, maybe you can add on to this as well. describe the broader LGBTQ community in Boston and Cambridge, and how it relates to Sloan students. You provided a great example, so I'm wondering if there might be other examples that others might be able to offer, or if you want to maybe further elaborate on how that came to be.
I feel bad for that I keep talking, so other people please jump in. I think for that event specifically, it honestly, I think one of my favorite parts about Boston is that it's truly such a curious city and so obviously so many top tier universities. So a lot of thinkers and doers and just people who are open to collaboration. And so and with your MIT email address, you can honestly like cold email people and they answer, which is amazing. So I just did cold outreach to a bunch of different types of organizations or groups, and everyone was very excited about collaborating and speaking to students. And I think in general, that is very true across the board, not only like in the queer community, but also there's the entrepreneurial ecosystem is obviously huge, which is great in terms of, and people are super open in terms of like recruiting, if that's something that you're interested in. Um, but there's always people that are willing to take your call. And so finding this organization that had, I live in New York now, and obviously like I feel like there's so much documented history from like Stonewall. And that's something that is very accessible. But coming to Boston, I was like, what is the queer community like here? It's not as big. Like let's just be clear. It's like definitely doesn't feel as in your face as other maybe more queer centric cities, but that's not to say that there's not a ton of resources available. And so, as part of this event, we learned about the history and historic taverns, many of which have now closed, unfortunately. But just being able to hear some video testimony and take a tour through some of, Boston's queer history was really memorable.
Yeah, I would say too. I mean, I'm originally from Spain, but I moved to Boston 2014. So I've been here like for like 11 years, and for college and then business school and working like in between and sort of during that time. But yeah, I would say that like of course like uh, especially recently with like Trump administration, not to get too political, but obviously there seems to be a lot of sort of slashing DI programs, all these kind of things. In 11 years, Boston has been the most liberal, like gay friendly, like city I've ever lived in. And Barcelona is very, very liberal as well. Again, I think like as Alexa was saying, I think it's definitely much smaller than other cities, just like also in general. But it's kind of like a little bit of a quirky. Like there's a lot of people here for in school, like working in healthcare, like in the big universities and everything. And yeah, I mean, I just remembering like this article that I think like again from my undergrad days that they published in this like Harvard like part of the journal saying that 4 out of 3 Harvard undergrads were gay. So I think it's definitely very definitely gay friendly place to live in. And I think from my personal experience, I joined Sloan with like a very specific like purpose, which was really to get more of like a business background, because my background in undergrad was in molecular biology, and I mean, as the company was sort of like growing more and actually, starting to raise like larger rounds of funding. I'm still pretty early, but like selling the system and all this kind of stuff. I think, I really wanted to do that, and I had this early admission like in there. So I spent I mean, I was kind of like working like really full time during my time at Sloan, which is not recommend, but I think Sloan is I think people are doing, each person has their own thing going on, and I thought it was great for that. But yeah, I thought it was like a really great experience, and really getting what I want out of that, but maybe was a little bit less participating, a little bit less in the events that Alex and Brian were mentioning.
Awesome. The next question I have is, how did you find community amongst other LGBTQ people at Sloan, both inside and outside the classroom, and student clubs?
I think obviously the Pride, Sloan Pride, for me was obviously like the biggest community hub. Um, but not everyone was super involved the whole time, nor do you have to be. I mean, I think there's so many, I love that there's so many different types of events. I was talking about them a little bit before in terms of, folks who are tilted more towards wanting to have smaller group hangs, dinners, game nights, and things like that, or study groups. Um, and then those who are more tilted towards wanting to go on trips or to travel and go to parties. Like it really runs the spectrum. But I think even just going to a couple events or meetings, you then have a familiar face that you see in the classroom, and maybe you didn't have a chance to chat with that person at the event, but you see their face, you sit near them, and then you have a friend. And I think that's true throughout your time at Sloan. You'll find, I mean, all the alums that you talk to are gonna, just go on and on about like the people, because it's true. Like you honestly can meet someone one time, they'll remember your story, and then you'll sit with them in class and become actual friends with them. So I think for me, Sloan Pride was definitely the place. But I'm sure other folks had different ways of building community, and sometimes you find it in places that you don't expect as well.
Anybody else want to chime in? All right. The next question that we got from somebody that's joining us this evening was, what aspects of Sloan's culture stood out to you the most when you first joined, and how have they shaped your experience both inside and outside the classroom?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about this because I mean, sort of not speaking directly about like LGBT community, but just like more general, like this my own experience. I thought like something I really liked about Sloan, I think, is that it's I mean, obviously from an academics perspective, like MIT Sloan is like absolutely one of the best research like programs in the world. If you check like Nobel laureates receiving Nobel Prize in economics. I mean, Sloan is consistently a place where there's laureates, like basically very frequently. I was kind of interested in like getting learning more about financial economics, and I really found that that was very interesting, like being able to take classes with really world experts. I mean, there's like Merton, for example, teaches a class on options, which is obviously like from BSM, and it's a really special experience to be able to do that. Or Andrew Law. There's just like a lot of very important faculty, I think, at Sloan that like teach MBA students, and so I really like kind of like the very like, I mean, I think I remember during my first week or something at Sloan for the orientation, they were asking like, what do you want to get out of your program? And among my classmates, each person has their own thing. Like for many people, it's also just like meeting new people or like something like that. I think for me, it was very much like the class I want to take, and sort of like learning that was sort of like maybe less typical, I think, for many students. And I thought that like the quality of like teaching and the ability of cross registering with other classes, and sort of the fact that like after the first term, you're basically free to take pretty much any class you want for the last 2 semesters, I thought was spectacular. And I was, I felt I was learning a ton from semester to semester. And I basically, yeah, I mean, went from really having absolutely no background in finance, and actually finishing doing like a finance track and taking classes that I thought were kind of like the hardest class I could take, at least at that point. So I thought that was like really great. And absolutely would definitely go again if I was back in 2022.
Always excited to hear an alum say they'd like to come back if if the opportunity presented itself. It makes what I feel every single day that much more realistic. Whenever I step foot on campus. Manny, you look like you were gonna come off mute. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, my experience was completely different from every other panelist here because I was part of the COVID cohort from 2020 to 2021. So none of the things that any of the panelists have mentioned were available to us. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, MIT did not feel like it would be safe to have people in large groups for obvious reasons. So all of the infrastructure that everyone mentioned which MIT essentially creates for students to plug themselves into, was non-existent. And so that meant that we had to create it ourselves. And so I think from that perspective, the real test comes out, right? You put all these people in the room and you want to say, okay, what makes it special? What makes them all special? Particularly when you don't have the institutional backing of the institute, right? And so I am happy to say that if we're going to answer the question of what sort of qualities did we see in Sloan come out immediately, I would say it was the ability of other people to see in you what others before would not see or could not see. And then equipping you with the tools to go out into the world and bring that version of yourself to a broader audience.
Really appreciate that answer. It's funny, I actually started working at Sloan as we were phasing out of the pandemic, and to see just the differences from students' experiences is always interesting to hear how they were able to make that time during the pandemic their own. So definitely appreciate that insight. The next question that we have before we transition to the Q&A from our audience is how does MIT Sloan actively integrate diversity and inclusion into team-based projects or the classroom experience beyond formal statements?
I think what I appreciated was the way that this was done in a really natural way. It wasn't like the forced DEI day where, it's just one day of the year and you have to teach a specific curriculum. Like I truly felt like it was integrated into the cases that we were learning, into especially in like our one of the core classes that you take as an MBA in the fall, organizational processes. Um, I just feel like so many of the lessons and so many of the like business context were so naturally incorporated into that class in a way that felt natural and not forced. So I think that's one thing. And then there's, of course, there's intentional days as well where there is more discussion around certain topics. But I think part of what I really liked about the program was that it didn't feel like it was just checking a box, like it felt natural.
Thank you for that, Alexa. Morgan, I can see on my screen that we have a number of questions in the chat. So I want to spend the time now to transition to questions that we receive from anybody that's joining us this evening.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rayvon, for passing. We do have some great questions in the Q&A, so again, feel free to keep asking them. We wanted to, or some folks in the chat are asking about SOs or significant others, partners who they're bringing to MIT. Were you able to bring your partner into any events or communities that you were part of at MIT? And how was your experience? Take it away, Manny.
So there's a special sort of so I'm a Sloan Fellow MBA, right? And the Sloan Fellows, as you saw in the initial slide, is a 12-month residential program as opposed to like a 2-year standard MBA program. A lot of the 2-year MBAs are still single Pringles, right? As we like to say. So they're not all of them have their significant others yet. Some of them do, right? There's a broad spectrum. For all the Sloan Fellows, pretty much everybody brings their significant other, everybody. And so for me, it was interesting because I was like, well, I have my husband, right? And he's here and, he makes empanadas and we have a great place to welcome everybody in. And I am proud to say that during one of the activities that we were able to have with Sloan, we had the SFMBA Olympics, the virtual Olympics. And my husband won. He is the only time in history Sloan Fellow FMBA Virtual Olympics winner, and he is a gay engineer from Argentina. So I'm going to think that pretty much says it all when it comes to Sloan.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like really had just started dating my my partner like shortly before Sloan, and then we were together all through the program and still are. But like, I would just add on to say that, yeah, there's absolutely no barrier at all. There's, I would say every organization, every social event is like totally welcoming to plus ones. And honestly, half the time he was more popular than I was. So there's no limitations whatsoever.
I would jump on, I would just want to build on that, the point that Brian made about your significant other being more popular than you. That was the case in my case too. Sergio was way more popular. Whenever people sort of had the two of us in a room, they would always go to him. And so it made you much more self-aware of yourself, right? Which is an important thing that we learn at Sloan. But it also is interesting, right? Because everybody says, oh, well, Sloan is going to be transformative. It will be a transformation for you. And it most definitely is. However, the thing that nobody says is that it is also a transformation for your significant other. When we started out, my husband was, more quiet than I was. By the end, he was entertaining, houses full of people, engaging with people much more. And so I think for me, that was one of the most sort of amazing aspects of the program. I wasn't just the one who was impacted, my husband was too.
We do have some more questions if we want to continue from the chat. I'm not a panelist and you don't want to hear from me, but we do have significant others or SO group chats or WhatsApp chats. So it is also like a formalized community. So not only, of course, are they welcome at any events, but we also really do try to integrate folks into the Sloan culture and any events that they're interested in. One great question we had was, are there opportunities for LGBT related community service in the area or volunteer opportunities through on-campus groups?
I'm trying to think about this. No immediate experience comes to mind. Maybe that's just because I missed it or didn't participate, but maybe this is an opportunity to highlight that just for all organizations on Sloan's campus, just like the curriculum is structured, it's really a build your own adventure type place. So there are resources available for, if creating more opportunities for community service is something that you're interested in, there's absolutely funding and organizational support to do that. And I know for a fact that there are ample opportunities to get involved in the community in Boston. I just have to confess that I wasn't particularly involved myself.
Yeah, I think in terms of specifically about LGBT related community service, I'm also like not that familiar about that. But I mean, I like the reason I actually wanted to really go to business school was actually because of interest in global health and sort of like seeing the ability of my background was really sort of like in research. I mean, I was in the same research lab for 4 years, and now I'm kind of doing PhD because I want to go to academia after this company again. But global health, I think, was kind of like what got me interested in sort of like seeing how transformative sort of the impact of technology and like building a company can be in the sense of going from like coming up with the idea to actually developing it and spend some time like around like half a year in very rural part of Western Kenya and working with a group for MGH. So Boston is a really good place for if you're interested in just generally like global health community service. There's like mass MGH, Brigham and Women's Hospital, Beth Israel are 3 massive hospitals. Dana-Farber, you have Harvard Harvard, MIT have like incredible programs doing, a lot of global health, like developing technologies for deployments in developing countries and others. And there's a ton of opportunities of collaborating with groups doing this kinds of work. So I'm like completely sure that like if you're looking to do tackle any specific, like more LGBTQ, maybe like related line of like research or others, there's probably like a million different groups tackling this from like a more research, like volunteering, any kind of aspect. So it's a really good place to do this kind of work if that's what you would want to do.
Manny, I think you had your hand raised. You want to say something?
Yeah, as a was born and raised in Boston, so I've got a pretty sort of good familiarity of like what sort of groups are out there for the LGBTQ plus community. But Jose and Brian, I think, covered pretty broad spectrum in that regard. And you just add that my experience during the pandemic, I was also able to see, if you wanted to start something on your own for whatever initiative, there definitely was the infrastructural backing, support, and funding for those students who wanted to do that. So there was nothing sort of stopping you from starting your own thing because you may have identified a gap.
And I'll just add really quickly before Morgan shares the next question. That still is the case. You'll find that MIT Sloan is a very much say yes kind of environment, and I'm sure our students will echo this. If you have a rhyme or reason for why you want to do something, if you can galvanize your peers to come and help you, whether it be through the student life office, the program office, they're more than happy to allow you to tailor your experience to accomplish whatever it is that you are hoping to accomplish during the time period that you're with us. Morgan, the floor is all yours.
Awesome. Love it. We do have more questions, so please keep them coming, folks, in the Q&A. Now, we definitely heard about quite a few C functions, and I'd love to hear about that P-Town trip. But this is a great question leading on to that. What's your best memory in the program so far?
I want
Kind of a
Brian to go
loaded
first.
question. Yeah, Alexa, go ahead. I've been yakking for a while, so please go
No,
ahead.
no, no. Go ahead, Manny. I was just gonna call out Brian, but let's hear
Okay,
it.
well, that's a pretty loaded, dangerous question, and you can answer it in a number of ways. Oh, I know. So we had the pandemic, right? And so we didn't have our MIT graduation until a year later. And so during our year, we said we're going to sort of hold our own graduation, and we did. And my favorite moment from the year didn't actually involve me, but it's a photo because uh, because we were putting on this graduation virtually, there was a sort of speaker's room right in the venue where we held it. And one of the speakers was Stella Machel, and she is a Sloan Fellow 2021 from Mozambique. And she's the closest thing anyone will ever come to meeting an actual saint. It's amazing. She's an amazing person. She's coming to my house this weekend on her way to Mozambique to visit her mother. And the moment I'm talking about is this very quick photo I snapped of her as she was reading off the teleprompter her speech for this graduation. And my husband was holding up the teleprompter to make it easier for her to read. And to me, that encapsulates so much of what Sloan is about. It's about putting yourself to the side and focusing on the task at hand and doing what you need to do to get that task accomplished.
I'll jump in with a couple more. I mean, there's too many great memories to count. Like honestly, my 2 years at Sloan were probably like the most enjoyable, happiest 2 years of my adult life. Like, um, but I'll give a couple of examples. One, like sort of just routine is, I loved just hosting classmates while I was at Sloan. Like I love to cook, love to throw a dinner party, love to throw a party in the apartment, whatever. And every year, like this is just a good example of how nice of a place Boston, and I lived in Somerville, is to live. But every year there's a thing called Porch Fest where all of Somerville, uh, you know, camps out on their front porches. It's all these like triple decker houses with big decks, and people play music. And so I would open up my apartment and have a million people come through, cook a ton of food. And that is just like encapsulates a memory of, how tight the community was, like how good of friends I was able to make during those 2 years at Sloan. Just a great time. Then another one is Alexa and I did one of these together, but actually both years I went on study tours, which are subsidized programs for which you get academic credit as well. where you travel to typically a set of a couple of different countries. So the first year I went to Japan and Vietnam, and the second year I went all over Scandinavia. The first one was more global trade oriented. The second was more sustainability oriented. And those were just incredible experiences that I never would have had were it not for being in the MBA program at Sloan. Just to learn, to spend time with classmates, to learn about them, and to have these incredible sort of tailored experiences abroad, learning about business context, cultural context, and all manner of things. Just really, really unbelievable experiences.
I was hoping Brian was going to say this study tour, or else I would have been really disappointed because I led that study tour and we had such a great time. And I think like on the organizing front, it was just so incredible to kind of like get a peek behind the curtain in the like working with administration and the program office to like put on a curriculum for half the semester. So like we built a syllabus, we brought in guest speakers, we taught a class, and then we got to do this 2-week trip during spring break where we got to meet with different companies and organizations that we had been learning about, and got a chance to actually like see what they were doing and bring back lessons learned to the US, and also have just a ton of fun while we were there. So I think that's definitely a big one of my fondest memories. And then also sticking on the international front, there's another class called Global Entrepreneurship Lab, or G Lab, which was another one of my most valuable experiences at Sloan. Had the opportunity to work with a startup in Indonesia. They were a glamping manufacturer, so kind of similar to like getaway cabins, if you're familiar with those. But they have just completely dominated the Indonesian market, and they were looking to launch in the US. So we were working with them for the fall semester to help them build the go-to-market, and then got to spend the month of January in Indonesia working with them in person, got to do a lot of travel, just learn a ton about the culture. And I think both of those classes and programs just really embody this like hands-on learning, mens et manus, if you will. At Sloan, like everything is just so practical, and I really love that. And not only are you learning, but you're also building incredible relationships with your peers and those around you.
One other point to mention, I can't believe, I mean, there's so many incredible memories during that year, right? But because we were the sort of COVID cohort, things got a little bit extended for us. MIT was very gracious in that regard. And I don't know how this managed to happen, but like it did, right? But we actually got to do an economics unit study in Lima, Peru. And I'm from Peru. My family's from Peru. And we actually got to have the final night of the course at my house in Peru, which was like 5 of the most wild, magical hours of my entire life, because everyone from my cohort came, but then we also had the EMBAs come, and it was just wild to sort of see both worlds collide together in 2 buses that were driving up the road to my house, and everybody was in them. And then like my husband was filming everything, and everybody got off, and there was like music and dancers and this and that, and also great food. And I sort of thought, like, I never would have thought that Sloan would be the conduit to bring these 2 worlds together. And I know, obviously, as LGBTQ plus individuals, that's a very fraught topic for a lot of us, right? Bringing all these worlds together as opposed to keeping them sort of compartmentalized. But Sloan was the key, right, in a lot of ways. So I think that's also another important topic to me. Sloan does. However, I don't know what the magic is, but it breaks down barriers that you yourself sometimes erect in your own life.
Yeah, and if I can say one more thing, just like for the organizer, I think the admissions committee at Sloan, I think I just want to say that it's absolutely extraordinary. I mean, in my personal experience, I had a little bit of as I was doing this like deferred admission program, I kind of missed the deadline for me to actually matriculate for the next year. I was planning to do 5 years, but I wanted to do 4, and basically it was 5 months late or something like that, and like I spoke with the team there, and they were able to give me a place at the like 10 days before the course started, and over the program there, I've met like other students doing this deferred admission program through the the assistant directors at the AdCom and the rest of the team there. So absolutely amazing team, and I think a great resource for for alumni as well. And but really grateful to the team there, because I think made at least my personal experience very different from that. And I'm not sure if the team remembers, but 2018 was the first year in which they were like allowing like non-MIT students to do that program, and I think they really made it work, sort of like in the late edition until September. So it's been a really amazing team to work with, and excited for anyone applying to interact with that team as well.
We appreciate that, Jose. Thanks for sharing. And I do want to give a little +1 to Somerville Porch Fest. That is a fabulous community event. I think we have time for just a couple more questions. We have some questions from allies in the chat. As an ally, what are some meaningful ways to contribute to Sloan's inclusive culture?
I'll jump in there. It's probably a well-known fact amongst the folks behind the scenes that my house was like party central during COVID times, and so I see Rayvon smiling, so I have a feeling he probably knows what I'm talking about, and that's okay. And so the question is, how can allies support sort of LGBTQ events and folks at Sloan? And the way that, like, I guess we didn't have any like club or anything like that, but the way that folks supported us, I guess, was just coming to our parties and showing up and blah 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 blah. And I don't know, that's created this weird sense of community like immediately, right? And so I guess just the normality of it all was something that really stuck with me.
All right. I'm gonna give you all one piece of homework assignment as I go over the next slide. And that homework assignment is to, as I'm covering the application slide, if you can think of one piece of advice you'd give yourself as you were in our audience, if you were in their seats, what would that one piece of advice be as you were preparing to embark on your MBA journey or your time in the Sloan Fellows program at MIT? So if you could think about what you would tell yourself, what you would tell your previous self now before you start join the program, that would be great. I'm going to jump over to our next slide really quickly and then come back in the future. You could answer that. That'll be how we wrap up the presentation today. All right, awesome. So just really quickly, wanted to cover some information about our upcoming application deadlines. If you found that the things that our panelists shared with you resonated really well and you want to take the next step in potentially joining the MIT Sloan community, just want to go over our application deadlines for this upcoming cycle. As you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, we have application deadlines for each of the different programs that were addressed today as far as the MBA and Sloan Fellows program is concerned. But then for the LGO program and the Masters of Finance and Masters of Business Analytics, you'll see that those two deadlines are going to be for the LGO program in early November. And then for the early career programs, MFin and MBAN, that's going to be in January, early January. On the opposite side of the screen, you'll see that there are the application components. We require you to submit pretty much everything that's standard for most applications. I'll highlight really quickly something that's unique to Sloan is the fact that we do ask you to submit an org chart. And that's something that a lot of the times we get questions about. I'll just say really quickly, we're just trying to get a sense of where you fit in the grand scheme of things as far as your organization is concerned. So highlighting maybe your team, maybe 2 levels above or below you, and then maybe to the right and the left of your team is all we're looking for. If you're working at a big organization, we're not going to ask you to name the CFO if you don't ever, interface with them. So things to keep in mind. And then another thing that we typically get questions about is our 60-second video. Simply, the prompt is introduce yourself to your future classmates. Just check 2 boxes. make sure that we can hear you, and make sure that we can see you. You check those two boxes, you're off to a great start. Talk about whatever your heart desires. We'll have additional opportunities for you to learn more about our community at other upcoming events that I encourage you to join. Here's just a full list of the upcoming community and culture events that are going to be available to you to join virtually. And then if you want to learn more about different DEI initiatives and things like that that are happening at MIT Sloan, I encourage you to visit this webpage here. But then also encourage you to visit our events calendar to see the full listing of other opportunities that you can participate in to continue to learn more about our campus community and ways that you can make the most of your time here should you decide to join us for either 1 year or 2 years. I'm sure if I ask our panelists, they'll tell you that that time flies by, like flies by. So to make the most of it, it's always helpful to have a game plan. And the best way to do that is to just get an early introduction to some of the resources that are available to you. With that said, I'm going to turn the floor back over to our panelist to answer the question that I assigned to you before going over that slide. And we can go in alphabetical order. So Alexa, not to put you on the spot, but you're going to kick us off.
What is one thing that I would tell myself? Is that what the question was?
Yes.
I would say try to figure out a way to never have to leave because truly it's like every day I'm like, I wish I was back at Sloan. No, I mean, I think this is like, you're going to hear this advice a lot, but it's worth repeating. Like, it's going to be drinking from a fire hose. Have your top 3 to 4 priorities or objectives of what you'd like to get out of the program and use that as your guiding North Star because in any day there's 10 different opportunities that or events or activities or things that you could be doing. So having that to kind of ground you and help you decide is, I think, very helpful to make sure you get what you want out of the program. But also give yourself some grace because now I look back at it and I'm like, oh my gosh, like how did I not know that this was a thing? Like I should have done this or, taken advantage of these resources. And the good thing is that it is a lifelong community and we have this network now, we have access. So just give yourself some grace, but just enjoy it, honestly.
Brian, you're up.
Yeah, I feel like Alexa basically stole the thunder there. I would say almost exactly the same thing. The number one advice that I give people when they're about to go into business school is to try to figure out exactly or as best as you can what you want to do at the program before day one. There really is so much to do. I think a different way of saying it is, a lot of people approach business school, especially people who are pivoting, like I was, with the intent of using those 2 years to sort of figure out what you would like to do next. That's absolutely a viable path, but there are trade-offs, and I think the experience is generally more productive if you have as best a sense as you possibly can of what you'd like to do when you're at the program. It's like you get in, you think that's it, and then you show up on campus and recruiting starts in like October. And things really do feel like they move at 100 miles an hour. So just game planning is helpful.
Yeah, I think it for myself, I think one of the things I've kind of like wondered is, I mean, it sounds a little bit corny, but it's sort of I think the sense like thinking about whether MBA is like a good fit for you, sort of like belonging there. I think in my experience, particularly with MIT, there's people that have like absolutely all sorts of backgrounds. I mean, actually, one of our co-founders, a professor at the Brigham of professor of neurosurgery, and he was actually part of Sloan's EMBA program a few years ago, William Gormley, which I'm not sure if like maybe your team like knows him, but I have a bunch of like surgeon friends from all the hospitals here that did MBAs at different programs. I think it's a degree that like I think with regards to what you would want to do, I mean like a more traditional business background, or if you want to work in research, healthcare, it's a great fit for that. And I think another very quick thing is like really doing work with the faculty at Sloan, I think it's absolutely extraordinary opportunity. I mean, they're like the best people in the world in their fields. And I did some work with Eric So during my time there, which I think was absolutely like incredible. And the Sloan's librarian team is extraordinary as well. I've been like very helpful in terms of like getting to know the research there. So yeah, that's what I would probably tell myself sort of looking back. And also feel free to add me on LinkedIn or anything if there's any other questions, like definitely feel free to reach out.
Awesome, awesome. Go ahead, Alexa.
Sorry, I hit that by accident, but I was just gonna +1 to adding on LinkedIn if you have any questions.